Okay. Hi, good evening. Thanks for coming out here. My name is Tom Dent. I'm with the Albuquerque Center for Peace and Justice. I'm also the coordinator of Central New Mexico Move to Amend, which is part of a national group that works to overturn the Supreme Court's Citizens United decision. We'd like to say that corporations are not people and that big money is not speech. We see a lot of corruption going on, and this forum is presented by March Against Corruption. So welcome to March Against Corruption presents Life After the Consent Decree. March Against Corruption is a national and international call for nonviolent protest in over 100 cities between November 1st and the 8th. So the flyers we're handing out list a few of the events that we plan to hold in the beginning of November, including a mass demonstration and also our participation in the Day of the Dead parade with Desert Spirits to mark the remembrance of people who have lost their lives in the last 4 to 5 years. We have 6 distinguished panelists. Professor Alfred Matheson of the UNM Law School was supposed to be here to talk about the DOJ and consent decree in general. We have Mike Gomez first, representing the families who have lost loved ones to APD. We have Ms. Stephanie Lopez, the president of the APD Police Union. Jonathan Siegel, who was on the Police Oversight Commission and has since resigned. Dinah Vargas, who's a media maven and activist. Richard Moore, a longtime community organizer and member of the Black Berets. And Tom Grover, a former APD policeman and current attorney here in the city. Let's talk. I guess Mike, maybe you can talk a little bit about because of a number of shootings, of murders within the last 4 to 5 years. Citizens groups have asked the Department of Justice to come in and investigate the excessive force by Albuquerque police. Mike, maybe you can talk about what you understand this process is. I guess in April they came out with their findings letter, and they are scheduled to release the consent decree in December or January. I think that's right. Mike, maybe I know that you and a lot of the families have shown up at City Council for 3 to 4 years, trying to get a decent process and justice for your families. I'll let you take over. Everybody has about 6 minutes, and Dan over here will let you know when your time is about up.
All right. Well, thanks for everybody coming here tonight. The DOJ process was quite a long one. To give you like a brief outline of what it took, you know, when we first started, there was just a few of us. City Council, nobody would really listen to us. And we finally started getting more people involved. And we found out, well, you know what? We were begging, pleading City Council, the APD when Schultz was there, city administration, the mayor has his head in the sand. So we tried every diplomatic way, we tried every, you know, just kind of like begging way, pleading, and nothing worked. So we decided, you know what, we're gonna have to go over their heads. That's the only way we can do it. We've got to get a third party in here. So that's when we started organizing a group through the Martin Luther King group. And, you know, I was just a father of a 22-year-old son that got killed by APD. I was never in politics. I was never, you know, a college graduate, nothing like that. But all I had was the incentive to wanting to do something, wanting to make the future better for other families who I wouldn't want them to lose their loved one the way I lost mine. So we formed a group, and we had a PhD person in there. We had some ex-UNM people in there. We had administrators of advertising. So we had a lot of different people in there. And we had this one lady, Dr. Moreland. She came up with a report that dated back to the 70s. Because that's what they wanted to see. They wanted to see a pattern and practice. So we gave them that. We gave them stuff that I couldn't believe. It was been happening from the 70s. And Richard here, he's lived it. He knows. And like I said, I was just a construction worker. When my son got killed, I started to look. I started to start, like what we're here for you folks to do, is start to look. Start to see what's really going on, you know? And start to realize that it's all a big corruptive situation. It's all about the money. It's all about greed, power. And, you know, it's like the rich people, they don't care what we have. They just want more. You know, we could have nothing, but they want more of what we have. And that's where we started working, getting to, you know, we were calling DC, where we sent them letters. We made a video. It's on YouTube right now. They didn't have to die. So we made that like 3 years ago. So if you want to check that out, it's about a 10-minute thing. And, you know, it's kind of outdated from what we've got now, you know, because we had a lot more killing since then. But it's on YouTube. Just Google or YouTube it. They didn't have to die. So we came up with that video. And we showed it to City Council, and they kind of said, oh, okay, that's nice. But we sent it to the DOJ, and, you know, we kept following up. We kept following up. I guess we were like a little kid just kind of bugging them, you know, bugging them, you know. Come on, this is for real, you know. And a lot of times the government don't believe that another government entity can lie to them, you know. Like, oh man, you know, we can't believe, they've got to be telling us the truth, right? Well, you know what? It doesn't happen that way. And another thing that really bugged me to get to the DOJ stuff, you know, I mean, we kept them informed of everything, you know. And finally, after keeping all that in touch with them throughout the years, basically, the months, I guess it was November 27th of 2012. That's when they announced that they were going to start looking at APD, you know, completely. They were going to start seeing if they had a pattern of practice, a pattern of, you know, injustice and practices. Well, it was about 500 days later, April the 10th, 2014, that they announced that scathing report. And on page 43, I think it is my son's part in that report. So I just want to give you a little outline, just a brief outline of what it took and how many months and years it took and how much, you know, of different people having to keep on putting, you know, the pressure to finally have the DOJ come here. And believe me, nobody believed they would come here. I talked to news people, they didn't believe they'd come here. I talked to politicians, they didn't believe they'd come here. I talked to the officers on the street sometimes, they said, no way, why would they come to a little town like this, you know? Well, here they are. Now we just gotta hope for justice.
Thank you, Mike. You guys will have a chance after all the panelists speak to get up and ask questions. Stephanie, I've been attending Citizen Police Academy, and I've been meeting a lot of good officers. I know there's good officers out there, and I guess it's perceived, unfortunately, that there's a small pocket of corruption or a small pocket of cops that would rather shoot first and ask questions later. I wish that officers wouldn't make remarks like they did before the James Boyd incident, or refer to their job as human waste disposal on Facebook. I know that the community has to get together, has to work together, especially after the consent decree comes out, and for a long time in a sustained effort with community policing, community involvement. How would you speak for the department, and how do you foresee us having better relationships with the community and working together in the future?
Well, Tom, first of all, I can't speak for the department itself. I can speak for the association and for the officers. The same as Mr. Gomez, I would say that I'm not a politician. I didn't have any type of college degree that prepared me for me coming into the presidency. I just felt that there needed to be a person who was going to speak on behalf of the officers when I initially ran for the position, I should say, because having been involved in incidents myself to where the department doesn't speak on behalf of the officers because of civil litigation, criminal litigation, whatever process there is, I believe that the officers need to have their own voice individually, and I know that there has been officers that have made mistakes in the past as far as individuals, but like Mr. Davis had said, I would hope that the community doesn't see the individual mistakes that are made by officers. Don't paint how the entire department is or how every police officer is, because that's not the situation and that's not the case. Every officer is responsible for his own actions and the predicament that he's put in, but it shouldn't be the entire department that's hated upon or is viewed badly as a result of one individual's actions. It's been a very educating experience, to say the least, for me coming in. I had the opportunity to meet with Mr. Ellis and Mr. Gomez on occasions too, and try to make myself available to as many community people as I can as well, because I want the association to be a bridge for the community and the department when the department doesn't necessarily have the ability to be put in a certain situation to not necessarily help the officer, because the department is in a sense like a business itself too. I mean, they have to worry about the department before they worry about the officer. And our main concern is the officer, so I would hope that when the community needs answers, that let us be that bridge. When I first came on, I asked, why is it impossible for us as the association to apologize or give our condolences to somebody who has lost a family member as a result of a use of force incident? And some people have the mentality that when you apologize or you're admitting to some sort of fault, that you're opening up that door to litigation at some point in time. And I don't see it that way. I just, you know, after talking to Mr. Ellis and Mr. Gomez, the empathy of just being able to say, hey, I'm sorry for your loss. I mean, you're not at fault, or it wasn't you. I mean, I'm sure I couldn't imagine. I have children myself, so I would know that if I was in the same similar situation, I would at least want to have answers for myself as a mother or as a parent or as a sibling or anybody. I mean, if you weren't involved in it, the situation yourself, at least something. And I asked the department, let us be that bridge for you, maybe not to every detail that they need answered, or it might be only a portion of what we can say, but as long as somebody is saying something, let us help you as the department, you know, speak on behalf of the officers to whatever extent we can. And I mean, obviously that hasn't been the case. I mean, I've been very vocal within the media or against city administration. Not that I want to be against them, it's just, I don't know what it is, you know, I only know how to tell what I think is what the officers want to have heard on their behalf. And I know that there's always repercussion, and I think that's what the association's problem has been in the past, is that you might have people put in a certain position that are there for a different benefit other than reaching out to the community. And I would want everybody here to know that I can't speak on the behalf of how it was in the past or how Mr. Gomez said years to come, because I've only been in this position for a year and a half. And I know in this year and a half that I've been here, we've had 3 chiefs under my term as presidency, and I can assure you with every chief, there has been a different policy, a different mentality of thinking, a different set of rules. And after, I mean, I think that the community thinks that when they're not happy with somebody, it's easy to say, we want somebody new, we want somebody new. But every time somebody new comes in, everything changes. And it's been very difficult in this position to have to, I mean, I can say with Chief Schultz, it was a totally different mentality. We went through a lot of terminations. I believe with Chief Banks that there was an attempt to balance with the department, the association, the community, city administration. And I haven't worked around Chief Eden long enough. I mean, I see that he's really trying. I just think he came into a bigger role than what he anticipated, probably just the same as me. So I think communication is going to be the best key, and I would like people to know that me, in the position that I am, will do my very best to try to communicate with the community as much as I possibly can, to be a voice for the officers. And I would just hope that you would all realize, as citizens of the community, which I am as well too, and which every officer is as well for the most part too, the majority of them living in Albuquerque, they are tax-paying citizens themselves as well. And I think a lot of them get a bad image based on mistakes individuals have made. And every action has a reaction to it, and that's what puts people in certain situations. And I can't speak on behalf of every individual, but I would just want the community to know that we do have a good department, and I just think they get painted in a bad way with depending on how the leadership is at that time.
Thank you, Stephanie. Mr. Siegel, I know that police officers are reaching out to neighborhood associations, working with them. From what I've seen with consent decrees in about 16 other cities, it seems like police oversight committees that are formed, they hear a lot of cases, but they don't really have direct disciplinary powers when it comes to corrupt leadership or officers that are up for murder charges. I know that it's been conceived that there's been perceived that there's been a number of different police oversight committees that have been formed, and I think there's another one in the process. Maybe you could talk to us about the overall process and why you were dissatisfied with the committee that you were sitting on.
Sure, thank you, and good evening, everybody. And first, let me turn to Stephanie and say, I appreciate the risk you take every time you put on the uniform, and I appreciate that you don't know who it is you're about to meet, and that must be a difficult situation, to put it mildly. And I've come to understand that through a lot of meetings with a lot of cops. I would like to start answering the question of oversight this way. Yesterday morning on the sidewalk, I was asked to step aside by a police officer. I was surprised. "What can I do for you?" I said. He said, "I just want to tell you, I hope you serve on the new Police Oversight Commission." I said, "I'm so surprised. I didn't even, how would you know I'm on?" He said, "Well, I watch." I said, "What makes you think I should do it?" He said, "I think you were tenacious. You asked hard questions, and you caused the most profound and difficult kind of oversight to occur that could possibly occur. And we cops think that vindicates us. We think that expresses how right it is for so many of us. And if there's a problem, you'll find it. If there's a problem, officer, you'll expose that. That's why I want you to serve." We chatted a little while longer, and I said, he said, "So will you do it?" And I said, "I'm really on the fence." "Why?" he asked. "Because the new ordinance may not go far enough in deeply dealing with citizen problems and review and proper care of those cases. And it may not be satisfactory to the citizenry. For example, a citizen who makes a complaint would not have the opportunity to speak to the new police board about their complaint, would not even necessarily be granted an appeal if they think the decision was poorly made, and the press would have no chance of watching the new police board to see whether they asked the hard questions, not having seen the cases in advance themselves. All of these, I think, are profound problems, and these are some of the reasons why I resigned from the past police oversight board back in the spring of this year. The officer looked at me and he said, "I would hate to think that you would get onto a board that pays lip service to oversight but doesn't really do it." And he said, "I can understand why you might have trepidation and might not want to sign up if that's the case." And he said, "That's a hard thing for me to say," said the officer to me. "We need good people like you on the oversight board, and we need good oversight to demonstrate who we are." Who am I? I'm a regular citizen. I'm an architect by trade. I've taught at the university. I've sat on various boards and commissions, from the State Board of Examiners to Architects to the City Planning Commission, recently the Police Oversight Board, neighborhood boards, and the rest of that. What I think I bring is a sense of fairness to the situation. I was the first sitting police oversight commissioner to take that citizens course at the academy. And when I walked in to take it, I said, "Is it okay if I come?" The guy says, "Yeah, but you're the first commissioner we've had ever, and we're really happy to have you." And when I resigned, the man who was running that academy course said to the class, "Class, do you know what happened today?" Some said yes, some said no. He said, "Well, I want you to know we have a hero in our midst, and that's Jonathan Siegel," and I was startled. And he said, "We need to hear from him. Today's agenda used to be da-da-da-da-da course that we're doing, but we're changing it. We're going to talk about oversight and what oversight means, and what it means to a good department, and why it's important." I said, "You got a deal, but I'd like to ask you to interrupt me if I say something that offends you, officer." He said, "You got a deal on that." And when I started to explain why I thought oversight was important, he did in fact interrupt me and added many more reasons why better oversight created better public confidence in the police department. I'm here to do that for all the good officers that serve, for all of the hard work that you do. And I'm there to look, and it's not very pleasant, at the hard cases and make hard judgments. As a person, I must say this, I'd rather not be involved in discipline. I'd rather give that back to the chief. It's my own take, and I've said that to those who would listen to me. What I think we do need, though, is some revision, even to the recently passed oversight ordinance. I think citizens are going to need a way to have their cases heard fairly and them to participate in order for them to feel a sense of fairness. And I think we need a solid press to vet and watch the oversight board. Who will even watch the oversight people? And I think that's the American way, and that's the freedom of the press, and I trust in them to say when I got it wrong, and that's okay with me. I hope that answers your questions.
Sure. Thank you very much, Jonathan. Dinah, I know you're very passionate about this issue in your community. I know you just traveled to Ferguson in support of Michael Brown and his family. And I know that you've been working with the families, and that you've been organizing like crazy. We've both been working together to try to bring a lot of the groups back together that have been very concerned about the murders and reform in APD. But I'm going to surprise you by asking an open-ended monetary question that we were talking about on internet radio yesterday. It has to do with a lot of money that's being generated. In my opinion, if we put a lot more money into nonviolent training for police officers, into other means of dealing, instead of excessive force, with, with James Boyd, for instance, with bear tranquilizers instead of shotguns, with counselors that could walk them out at night after the crisis may be over or something like that, without having to go to civil court and settling these cases for families that lost their loved ones for millions of dollars, without paying all this money to these experts that come in from Cincinnati to help us with our process and help us understand our process. Like I asked you on the program yesterday, is why aren't we taking care of our own affairs? And and the caller even asked, why isn't the city attorney taking care of these affairs? We're shelling out tons of money to taser. We're probably losing a lot of tourism money and frightening away businesses from coming over here because of the perceived culture of violence. So I don't really have a question for you. That being open-ended, I'll just let you go.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. I'm really thankful to be here today among a beautiful panelist of people. I thought of the whole life after the consent decree and what exactly that meant for me. So life after the consent decree. So I just started with some definitions, and consent basically means to give permission. So if I'm consenting to this consent decree, it has to be with my permission, with our permission, because this is my city, it's your city, indeed it is our city. And so I said, well, what does decree mean? And it's what it's defined as is a legal official order. So I have to consent, or am I compelled? You know, I'm sort of still on the fence with consent decree, because for me, consent is to constantly check in. You know, is this okay? We want to start our healing, our resolution, because we can't do that until we have acknowledged that this city does not have a problem. We are in crisis, period. The debate is over. We live in a culture of violence, and our police department has a culture of violence. And so how do we get past that? How do we get back to community policing in life after the consent decree? And I asked myself, well, if they came out with the best possible consent decree, will that solve our city's problem? Will that solve the culture of violence? Because the DOJ said two things. It was a culture of violence, and they also said that it was systemic, meaning that the rules and policies themselves create officers to violate your Fourth Amendment right through no fault of their own. So then we got to rewrite those policies, like from a systemic point of view, from a departmental point of view. And so, but the culture of violence, we're all culture. Culture in me is in my hands, it's in my thoughts, and it's in my actions. So how do we change both of them within this consent decree that we can all live in peace? How do we live life after consent decree? Because I want to live. That's what I want to do. I want the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, if I can. And so back to what Tom had said, how do we effectively have faith in the consent decree when it's being negotiated with a bunch of money surrounding it, yet our city tells us time and time again there is no money. There is no money for your mental illness. There is no money for your homelessness. There is no money to help you. There is no money for our schools. There is nothing here. But yet the money is in abundance when we're building prisons, when money is being diverted away from grassroots and community people. Why can't we invest in people? You know, we talk about, you know, businesses and the beginning of the DOJ, it didn't start with our city. Our city officials, our mayor didn't say, you know, we have a problem. And as a mayor, as a leader, I'm going to do something. It didn't happen that way. It happened because of people. So we don't need more government. We don't need more task force and more Tom Stryker and Scott Greenwood, who's taken more than what they should have from my city, from your city, from our city. They've taken more than what they should have. It's the same dirty money underneath the same dirty table by the same dirty hands, and it has been consented upon by our silence, and its authority has been passed down from CABQ. That's a fact. I mean, it's there. $2 million to Taser International. Same guy that's running that is here to negotiate DOJ, ex-Chief Cincinnati, Tom Stryker. How am I supposed to feel confident in my consent to that? How do I consent to that? That's sort of always been my question. And so, you know, I just keep going back to people. There's power in people. There's power in our voices. And to consent to anything unjust in our city by your silence is consent. And I, time and time again, and I've done it in many ways, and where it looks like civil disobedience, right, near arrest, because I said I do not consent. Because everybody keeps waiting for people to say no when what they should have done is wait for us to have said yes, I consent. Nobody asked us that. See, they could have done a bunch of things. They could have come out and said, hey, our city is in crisis and we're going to do something about it. But they did nothing to this day. Our governor and our mayor has not come out and said that we even have a problem. I have a better chance, and I thank you, of answering my calls to our police union than I do our mayor, because we get arrested anytime we want to call them. I have a better chance of calling people like Mike Gomez anytime we want to collectively get in our communities to make our city better. It's people. There is power in people. And whether we will it or not, it's upon us. And so we either consent to healthy community, grassroots organizations and people and communities, or we consent to that. That's what you consent to. You got two choices. It's one or the other. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dinah. As I mentioned before, I am attending Citizen Police Academy, and I feel like the idea of community policing, it has to be viewed as a new idea taken on by the community. The community has to get involved in so many different phases. I think there's a lot of people to blame, but I think a lot of the community apathy here has to change. We have to get out and vote. We have to use whatever tools are at hand, with any tools that we have. We have to get involved with our neighborhood groups. We have to get involved with community activist groups. We have to police the police after the consent decree. It has to be a long-term effort. It has to be for the rest of our lives to keep our communities safe. When I look at community policing, and I look at a lot of the people that are attending the academy with me, I see people that are just kind of interested in police, or they want to fire a gun, or they're kind of like glorified block captains. I used to be a block captain, but we need to take this much more seriously than just block captaining. There's a huge shopping center at San Mateo and Catherine. It used to be called the Parkland Hills Shopping Center, and it's dilapidated. Nobody's used it for over 12 years. My vision is to take, and they're huge buildings. My vision is to take that and put a police substation in there and put a real community police station right next door with an open door policy, so people can come and go. They can go on ride-alongs with police. They can go up with police to the mentally challenged, to the people who are having problems in the neighborhood, and act as a buffer to keep those citizens safe. And you know, so you can see the difference between the communities right there. And our city is very diverse as far as the communities are concerned. There is a perception that certain people in the administration serve a certain affluent part of the community, and let communities where people who are impoverished, who are homeless, who who do not have that many opportunities. Dinah was just referring to kind of the obvious cycle. In New Mexico, a lot of us are poor. We don't have job opportunities. We need to bring in those jobs in schools and technology and learning. So families don't have to work 3 different jobs. So they have time to get involved in their schools and their children's education. So everybody has an opportunity here, and everybody is fairly protected. Richard, I know that you've been involved in the community for a long time as an environmental activist, as an agricultural activist, and that at one time, I think you and your friends, your neighbors were forced to take matters into your own hands and to police the police and make sure that your community was safe. So my original question for you was, what could you tell me about the history of community activism in Albuquerque, your relationship with the police, and given what we've discussed so far, what do you see as the future for community activism in Albuquerque?
Good. Thank you, Tom, and it's an honor to be here this evening. I'm here tonight representing Los Sardinas Institute, the Gardens Institute. It's an organization, a community-based organization here in the city of Albuquerque in the state of New Mexico. I just wanted to begin my brief comments looking at life after the consent decree and just make a comment, and then for a second or two look at life before the consent decree. One is to say that there's a major element that's missing in terms of the investigation that the Department of Justice had completed, and that's the question of race and class. Now, the DOJ cannot say that race and class was not testified to by many that came in and to speak to the DOJ, both publicly and individually. Many of our sisters and brothers, many of my neighbors, many of the residents that we've been involved in throughout the years are quite fearful of the Albuquerque Police Department. But I won't say it's just APD. It could be the Sheriff's Department, the State Police, and all the other police agencies in the city. And unfortunately, that's the reality of the life that we live. My son, and I testified to the Albuquerque City Council, had asked me at one particular point because he had been pulled over and harassed by a police officer, and I said, well, you know, we should go down, son, and report this to Internal Affairs. And he looked at me and he said, you know, Father, with all respect, you know as well as I do that the chances of Internal Affairs, quite frankly, listening to me, or if they do listen to me doing anything about it, is highly unlikely, and the harassment will probably continue and triple more than it's been before. So I just want to, and I want to say to Stephanie with all respect, and I really do appreciate you being here. I've had the opportunity to hear you on the radio and so on, but I do have to say that the code of silence within the Albuquerque Police Department is one of the primary elements of a very difficult situation. I know at the end of the day that there's decent police officers on that force. I've encountered throughout the years some of those police officers, and they've been extremely helpful and whatever. But I do have to flag the code of silence, because when one is knowledgeable and does not speak, then that individual is just as guilty as those that carried out that act. So I just have to state that has nothing to do with you personally, but you all need to take a very serious look at that within the police association. One, I will go back a little bit very quickly. Police repression and police violence in the city is nothing new. It's not recent, and I'll give some very quick examples of that. One, many of us that come out of the Chicano movement, particularly the youth movement of the 60s and the 70s, are very knowledgeable that it wasn't just in Albuquerque where police brutality and police repression was taking place. It was all over the state of New Mexico. And as we see again today, whether it's Ferguson or wherever it may be, that repeats itself. Repeats itself in northern New Mexico, in Santa Fe, and southern New Mexico, and central New Mexico, and we could go on and on and on with the kind of brutality that many of our people are being impacted by. As some of you know, in 1972, January 29th of 1972, 2 members of our organization were assassinated by the Albuquerque Police Department. And I say the word assassination and believe me, that we don't use words lightly. We don't use race lightly, we don't use class lightly, and we don't use assassination lightly. And very clearly, Rito Canales and Antonio Cordova on January 29th were assassinated by not only the Albuquerque Police Department, but by the Metro Squad, with which it was called during that time, which was the coming together of the State Police, the Sheriff's Department, and the Albuquerque Police Department. Now, we could go on and on. As a member of the Black Berets, and as Tom mentioned, we were servicing our communities. We had breakfast programs, lunch programs. We had dental clinics. We had health clinics. We opened up all of those facilities because our community asked us to do that, and very clearly we did that, and we were serving our community. But then they had to ask us one more thing, and that was to keep the Albuquerque Police Department, in this case, out of the community because of the harassment, the surveillance, the constant threat and intimidation and beatings that the police department was forcing on many of the residents of those communities. So you all may or may not know, before 1972, we set up what was called the Black Beret Community Patrol, and community members called into our office and reported and asked us to come into the community and we patrolled the neighborhoods and so on. Now, UMAS, I'll give you another example, United Mexican American Students, who we founded in the 60s and 70s. Bobby Garcia was found dead in the mountains here right outside of the city of Albuquerque. There was a police officer that was arrested and sentenced that made the comment, never believed that that was suicide. Very clearly, it was an intentional assassination when Bobby Garcia was killed and shot by a double-barrel shotgun and left in the mountains. We could go on and on and on with this, but I say life before the consent decree. And I say that to you because it's been 48 years that I have been, not me by myself. We have never done anything in my life by ourselves. No, we form organizations, we build community, and we continue to do that. Life after the consent decree will be those of you that are in this room and our sisters and brothers and others that are not present for many reasons here this evening, because if it's taken us 48 years to get to where we are in my life, then it may take another 48 years to get someplace else. So what I encourage you all to do is to stay consistent, stay persistent, and build community, build powerful organizations, build movement, and if we do all of those things together, then truly we can make our communities a better place for us to live, our city, our state, this country, and the world. But based upon that, there's a lot of changes that need to take place, and it's going to take many of us, like many of us in this room and beyond, to help make that happen. So I thank you very much for allowing me the opportunity, or us the opportunity, to speak to you this evening. Thank you again.
Gracias, brother.
Tough act to follow.
Thank you, Richard. I actually invited the District Attorney, Carrie Brandenburg, to be here today. How she called me, it really surprised me. I left a message with her secretary saying that I felt that Officer Sandy should be indicted for premeditated murder because of his remarks about James Boyd prior to the shooting or the killing. And we talked about a lot of things, and we talked about the legal process and grand juries and whether or not she could successfully indict a police officer. She told me that there was like a maelstrom of laws out there and regulations that kind of superseded her powers to do her job and to form, how difficult it was to form grand juries, and out of so many grand juries, maybe only one police officer would stand trial, and then based on video and testimony and all this stuff, that was incredibly hard to ever render an indictment. And Tom, I know you have a unique perspective because you once served as a police officer, and when we were talking, I said, well, at Citizens Police Academy, they say this is a hard job, and we have to, we don't get that much therapy, psychological training, and we see the horrible side of life 24/7. And you said, well, this is what these guys sign up for. They knew what they were getting into. They know what this job is about, and and they do, in my opinion, they do have to have proper training and use other means of subduing a suspected criminal rather than shooting them in the head with a shotgun or murder. Anyway, I'll go on to say that I think you've seen things from a number of different angles that we have, and I know you served for a long time on the police force. I know that you were a friend of Mary Hans, who was very deep into pursuing corruption throughout the police department. And I know I have friends that have been in law school with you, and they were very surprised at how fast you went through school, how quickly you graduated, how quickly you took the bar, and now that you've set up your own practice. So I'll just, with that being said, I'll just let you go.
Thank you, Tom. I appreciate the invitation for this evening. Quick background about me. I was an officer and I was a sergeant with the Albuquerque Police Department until December 26, 2011. Prior to then, I'd worked in the field for 8 years, and I worked in the Valley. And I put on a uniform and I went and patrolled the streets of the South Valley, South Broadway, Duranus, Bareilles, every day. And being a cop is truly a calling, and it's one of the best jobs you could have if you're cut for it. And that means you're going to see a side of society that is raw and needs help, and you're expected to handle and deal with that. And if you're not cut for those sorts of demands, then do find something else to do. So it's a true calling because people are going to ask you for help, and that's the expectation. And as I was in the department, the city was generous enough to help fund my master's studies, where I went and completed my master's degree in public administration at UNM. And I was about a semester into the program where I found that as an institution, APD had severe problems. When it came to sort of best practices, APD deviated, departed, neglected to do things that made common sense, whether it was budget issues, staffing, patrol assignments, patrol scheduling. Almost any number of approaches, I saw that there were problems with the department. And as I went through that program, it became very clear to me that this was a department that was completely disinterested in doing things, not only what are really sort of good models, best practices, but actually would avoid implementing any programs or holding people responsible when there were failures. And the fact that we're all here tonight is evidence that there are significant failures in this department. It's a progression for me from my master's degree, led me to law school, because I saw people victimized in the department. I saw the department doing things in the community that were in the interest of the department only, and not in support of the badge and the oath that I took to uphold the Constitution. I didn't take an oath of obedience or allegiance, a soldier's oath to Ray Schultz or the mayor. I took it to the Constitution. And if that means the department needs to be held accountable, then that's how it is. And that's how good cops think. So I started law school, and I resigned from the department at the top of my game as a sergeant. And I blasted through law school. I graduated last December. I got admitted this past April. And I have clients who are cops. I have clients who are former cops. I have clients that have been arrested by cops. I have clients that have been arrested in the mayor's office for protesting the very things that have brought us all here together. And the constant theme that I've seen over and over and over again is this. This town has a problem with accountability. The chief is not held accountable for failures. The mayor is not held accountable for failures. Officers are rarely held accountable for failures. And if they are, they're only patrolmen, because we'll never see a sergeant, a lieutenant, a commander, a major, a deputy chief, or a chief held accountable for failures. We have a DA that just coasts along that's never been held accountable. And I think when DOJ came in, a lot of the expectation and the excitement that came in was, at last, finally, there's going to be that entity that comes in and says, we're going to hold somebody accountable. They're going to provide that objective look at APD as an institution and hold them accountable. And to some extent they have. They've put something down on paper that shows, there are these deficiencies, there are these failures, there are these departures. And, to people that are following the department who have been inside of it, there isn't anything really surprising in the findings letter that came out. It didn't surprise me at all. In fact, there were some omissions that I found kind of striking. But there's been this constant departure of holding people accountable. Now, fortunately, where I am now as a lawyer, that's my job. My job is to go after and compel people to be accountable. I have plaintiffs in this room. I have clients. I also have defendants in here. And it's all in the spirit of holding people accountable, because that is that failure of accountability is what's led us here today. And what does life mean after the consent decree? I don't think it means very much, to be perfectly honest with you, because what it's going to depend on is who the federal monitor is and how aggressive they're going to be at holding the city accountable for its departures of that consent decree, okay? The current chief, his actions have more or less spoken for himself since he came on board earlier this year. He's struggling, he's floundering. Whether or not he remains, I don't know. But because we have the same faces still staffing the department, there isn't anything that leads me to believe that there's going to be any change in the department to restore faith in the community, to address the lack of accountability that's gone on. The previous chief before him, Alan Banks, we all know what his idea of accountability was: to pull the ripcord and get out of the state as fast as possible and take a position in Texas. And then there's the matter of Ray Schultz, who creates the situation that we're all in and use it as an opportunity to take a corporate position with a weapons company, Taser. And I think that speaks for itself.
Thank you, Tom. We have some great panelists here, and another thing in my conversation with the DA is, and I think they've kind of hinted at it at Police Academy, is they. I guess there's a perception. I don't know if it was politically motivated by fear or whatever, that this town is bristling with guns. I don't know. Maybe I hang out too much with the peace and justice community. I rarely know anybody that has a gun or a concealed weapon or anything like that. But I guess you have to be careful because, if you have a cigarette lighter and your back is turned, they may perceive it as a gun and shoot you in the back or shoot you, or little knives or whatever. And we've been talking about legal issues here and the law school. And that's another thing. There are lawyers from lawyers from Florida. There've been a team of lawyers from the Philippines that have contacted us at the Peace and Justice Center. There are lawyers from Los Angeles that are very interested in what's going on here and what's going to turn out once the consent decree is presented. And one of the most interesting things I've attended lately was a forum put on at the UNM Law School by Miss Jewel Hall, who's over here with Counselor Sanchez. Thank you for coming, Counselor. And the professor that oversaw the seminar was Professor Alfred Matheson. And I'm going to kind of segue into the public question and answer by asking Professor Matheson to come up to the microphone. I know I'm going to put you on the spot, but you're going to be the first in line for question and answers. Since you were invited to this panel and came here a little bit later, but I do want to thank you for getting your 4 law students to analyze the contents of the finding letters, and hopefully you can add to the discussion. And I know that there were a number of people that came up to you at the end and wanted to include racial profiling as a main focus of the consent consent decree. I don't know if we pursued that or if that's even possible, and maybe you can address these concerns.
Thank you. I got a little tour around the building trying to find out how to get inside after I got here. And I saw I could see you sitting, but I thought there were just windows. So I walked all the way around before I discovered there was a door over here. But I guess where I would start, I do have the students who are very excited in terms of trying to learn about the consent decree and trying to help people in the community in terms of working with the consent decree. Recently I was on a radio program, and it was called in, and one of the callers said something about his profound distrust of the police in terms of things that had happened, how bad it was. He didn't think it could ever be solved, and they turned and asked me, what did I have to say to him given how he now saw things? And my answer was, as a lawyer, I am a member of the system. I believe in that system. I believe it can be made to work. That's why we train law students. That's why we have the lawyers out here. And so with the consent decree, one of the things I like to do is to show people how to use the rules for your advantage. The consent decree, there's a lot of hope placed in the consent decree, but it is just one step. There's how it comes to be. There is what happens after. I appreciated Dinah's comments, her question about the consent, what it meant, who the parties are, because the legal side of this is the city and the Department of Justice who are the parties. However, there is a role for the community in helping shape what happens. In the findings letter, the DOJ actually gave an outline of what the consent decree would look like. And I've heard a lot of people sort of talk about the consent decree, but not about sort of the details that make up the consent decree. That oversight process is one of the things that will make up that consent decree. My guess is right now where it's headed is accepting what was approved by the council. But it's not done yet. As a part of that process, there was a joint statement of principles issued over the summer. Once DOJ and the city have reached an agreement, it will go to the council. And so there's going to be a council meeting at some point. And there will be a chance to weigh in on provisions, questions that you have that are still there hanging. And then once it gets through the council, then it will be filed in court. And there will be another opportunity for people to weigh in. Once the court issues that order, you're not done. It's just that there's something that's a court order. There will be a federal monitor, but work is going to be required. The same energy that you put into bringing DOJ here, the same energy that you're looking at now will be needed once the consent decree. There will be a monitor. But if you really want to see this thing work, your efforts after the decree are making sure. You know that on the city website, there was an announcement that there will be 6 regional community policing councils that you go on to sign up to apply to try to become a member of one of those councils. There is a place, it's there. Now, my guess is that the consent decree may include something about it as well. That was something that the city said that they would do, and it's there. Whether that's what remains, again, that's a place where the community can weigh in on. But anyway, I'm just saying that part of what we would have the students doing is looking at all those decrees, what's in there. One of the questions at that forum was about something that would not be in the decree, and that's whether the officers listed in the findings letter will be held criminally liable. I wanted to see the criminal liability side of it. That's a different part of the Department of Justice, but there are 2 possibilities. One is that the Department of Justice in the criminal section makes a finding that the officers violated civil rights laws. And then the second part is on this is the DA here in terms of looking under state law whether there was whether you can murder, manslaughter, negligent homicide, that whether there's a finding that there was a criminal liability under state law. But that's outside of the decree, but that's something that the students have also been looking at.
Very good, thank you. If you do have a question right now, please walk up to the microphone. We need to continually get involved in this. I keep racking my brains about what citizens can do. Write letters to the editors, like Professor Matheson hinted at. Join these district commissions, panels. Get involved with your neighborhood associations. Film, have forums like this. Get the message out to the three big TV stations. Does anybody have a question? Yeah.
I have a question for Stephanie Lopez. You know, you just made the statement a few minutes ago that you felt like you couldn't represent the department. You're the union president. That's your job. You also made the statement that you don't want the department to be judged on the actions of a few in the department. Well, why don't you get these horrible people off the police force? You know, why don't you, as the union president, stand up and say, we've got some rotten people on this force, and as the union president, why don't you do something to get them off of the force? That's my question.
Well, thank you. This is the public's forum. This is a question and answer period. Please, if you have any questions, I expected people to get up to that microphone there. If you want the roving mic, I'll come over to you. Sure.
I would like to respond.
I'm sorry. You respond, Stephanie?
When I say that I don't represent the department, I can't speak on the department's behalf. Like I said, I am a representative of the officers themselves. It's not that I don't do my job. I don't have the discretion to terminate somebody or to suspend them. It is my job to represent the officer individually. I know that the community, like I said, are upset with certain individuals' actions, and each individual is on a case-by-case basis. And I do believe that officers are disciplined to some extent, maybe not the officers that you guys, I don't know which officer I'm assuming Keith Sandy is probably who she's talking about directly. I mean, each officer is entitled to a process of discipline, and I've had one of the reporters ask me themselves is, why does it take so long for an officer to be disciplined? And in a case where there's a use of force, a deadly use of force, it's a multi-jurisdictional agency that it goes through. So not only does it go through our department, but it goes through the sheriff's department, and it goes through state police who are investigating it. And then it gets sent to the district attorney's office. And then it gets sent back to the department. Like you can see that the APD's investigation just got released now, and look at how many months it was past the time from the date of incident. So I think people need to realize that once APD's investigation is done, then the DA will do their investigation, and based on their findings, it'll come back to the department, and then the department will do its administrative action against that individual officer. Whereas if it was just a use of force, maybe a fight, or somebody being injured but not deceased in that instance with the use of force itself, it would be handled just administratively. And the administration portion is handled by the internal affairs of the department, whereas the discipline will be issued a lot more quicker. And they have the same rights as anybody else that's the citizen of the United States. Is they have an appellate process to where once a pre-disciplinary hearing is issued or administered to them, and a suspension or a termination is issued to them, then they have the right to have a laudermill with the chief, to where they will plead their case before the chief, and based on the chief's final decision for discipline, then they have the right within 10 days to appeal that process and go before the Personnel Labor Board as well. Doesn't always necessarily mean that it'd be in their benefit or to their detriment, but I think the unfortunate part that the media sees is, and it seems like it's happening more and more frequently now, is that incidents or certain parts of the case before it's even went to the completion of it has been released in the media. And the media, when they're portraying it in their stories, you're only hearing 30% of the accuracy of it. The media is telling you what they want you to hear or what they want you to read. And this is before, look at all the footage you received from the Keith Sandy shooting prior to the report even being released to the media. I mean, it was only released to the DA's office this week, but how much footage have you seen from that? And how much speculation have you seen from that? And how much opinion have you been given from it before the actual investigation in its entirety was released? I have no control. I just want you to know that I have no control over a termination, a suspension, or any type of discipline with an officer. But I would hope that the community does know that just because you don't see it on the TV, officers are held accountable. With Mr. Grover, I would have to agree to some extent. That was a part of what made me want to take onto this position, was the inconsistency that we had and the lack of fairness, I would say, with previous chiefs, was social media being a part of it. I would see people that were terminated for violating a social media policy. I would see somebody given a suspension for 120 hours for a violation of a social media policy, and then I would see officers that were told, don't do it again. And that's what was upsetting to me as a police officer myself, was the constant inconsistency and the lack of fairness that we had amongst officers and discipline. The only unfortunate part that the community doesn't see is not every case is publicized, but officers are held accountable. And I think when an officer is receiving a 160-hour suspension or a 240 hours suspension, that is a big, big impact on their livelihood and their financial support for their family.
Can I tuck in and add a couple of comments and then turn it still to your questions? The questions go to the heart of a mistrust of the community and a set of perceptions from the community, in my mind, that there is, it was said earlier, a code of silence. That it's all a big corrupt situation, that all of the politics. We need, I think, collectively, and that means the citizens, and it means the officers, the doubters, together. We need to admit to the problem and reach across to find ways to solve it. And I'd sort of like to hear Tom's perception of what the union and Stephanie can do versus the chiefs in terms of reaching out and solving the problems that the fairly asked question, a very deep question.
That's what I was just getting ready to follow up.
All right.
What can you do? I know you can do something. You can do something. You're the union president and you represent these officers. I understand what you're saying, that you're not in charge of discipline, but you represent these officers, and you need to stand up as the union president and represent these officers who are decent officers on this force and get rid of these bad ones. You can do it as a group. Stand up and do the right thing. All of these good officers, and if you're one, you'll do it, Stephanie. Let's see if you're really a good officer.
My comment on this, and you're not going to like it, the APOA exists to represent all the cops, okay? The good and the bad, okay? That's the clear answer, okay? And I'm going to be completely frank with you. That is the APOA's job, is to represent all of the cops all the time in an equal manner. It's up to the chief, it's up to the city to deal with the ones that are departing or causing misconduct. And if the chief is sitting on his hands because it's a politically hot issue or the mayor won't do it, then call your city councilor, okay? And demand that when the chief comes up at city council, that they get raked over the coals, okay? The APOA, that's their fundamental job, is to represent all the cops. Okay, and I know that means some of the ones that have caused the problem that we're all here about get represented, but that's what it's about. We don't get to pick and choose, because what happens if it's you that's on the receiving end of not getting represented? Okay, that's their job. And I know people are like, how can we do that? I mean, that's the really good cops, they're getting tarnished by the bad ones. But you know what? It's not the APOA. It's the chief and it's the department that is, cutting and running or making, examples of some cops while letting others that are frankly criminals in uniform get away with crime after crime after crime. Okay? So the accountability rests with the chief, it rests with the city. Okay? The APOA, that's their job. And a lot of people have a hard time with that, but that's just how it is. That's how they are. And I can tell you, I'm from back east, okay? Labor unions here in New Mexico are nothing compared to the power that exists in labor unions back east, okay? Very light, you know, if not cooperative relationship between unions here than versus the adversarial relationship back east. And I'll be happy to talk to you about some of the details afterwards, but so. But I mean, I'll just say it out. Their job is to represent all the cops, and the good and the bad, the ones that get convicted for child pornography, and the ones that, you know, they made, they slipped up, you know, some minor SOP. You know, why should an officer who fails to write a report get fired, you know, within weeks of an investigation versus, you know, the incident that happened with James Boyd that causes national attention? He doesn't turn his lapel cam, has another accident, whatever you want to call it, shouldn't have been hired in the first place. You know, they do concurrent administrative investigations. They've done that before. There's no reason in the world why they couldn't have done it now. But I don't know the internals going on with Sandy. But I know that I'm part of a team that's looking at that case, so.
You have a question?
Yes, please. Well, first, I want to say thank you to the coordinators and to the panelists and to the counselor who left. I guess 1 out of 5 is a good start, or 6. Or sometimes I wonder if between all of them they're really adding up or not. But I guess we can deal with that issue at the time and place, right? But I kind of had a set of questions. I guess one of it is that I'm kind of out of the loop, but I haven't really checked on the status of some things because I'm kind of like, we know we have a problem. We know we have limited options for how to pursue solutions. We know we have like real constraints, whether it's the amount of million and million upon million of dollar lawsuits that we're having to pay out, or it's the lives, the very lives that are being lost and at any moment can continue to be taken. So there's a lot at stake, the pressure's on, and I know people are really pretty tired of this shit. Pardon my language, but I really don't have any other better word to describe it with. I think it's, you know, way past due for some drastic changes, which brings me to my question for all the panelists and what you might suggest as to how we might be able to proceed now. We know the consent decree is like a paper. We know, like Tom said, if nobody's really going to keep the pressure, even when there's been pressure, we see that there's the outright disregard by the leadership, whether it's the mayor or it's chief. We know we have problems there, which brings me to ask if anybody knows what the status is of the petitioning for the signatures to do a recall on the mayor. What do you suggest? How can we proceed as legally as possible? Because you know what? We're lucky that somebody hasn't just kind of gone off the deep end and added to the problem. I am a firm believer in self-defense. But I am also a firm believer of really taking things urgently and seriously. Because when activists end up killed and found dead in the mountains, and when civil rights attorneys like Mary Hahn, who it's going to be 4 years that she was killed, and nobody's gone to jail, at most we've gotten King to say that the cause of her death should have been deemed undetermined as opposed to suicide, people are still dying. And not just, you know, the mentally ill who are homeless and finding somewhere to sleep at night, but the leaders in our community who went to school, who fought fair and square, who were in those courtrooms like Mary, who were like the activists, you know, using our right to protest, using our right to petition, and fighting fair and square for all we can say is legal, only to be undermined by the same exact corrupt, hiding behind the immunity of the law monstrosity that we've allowed to go on. And I know we haven't allowed for it to go on because we're not doing anything. We've allowed for it to go on, I think, because we've scattered our efforts, and really, fortunately, I think this forum is occurring where we can all be real about what we can expect from the feds, what we can expect from the city council, what we can't expect from them. But what do we have in our power? And that's my question to those of you who know like more of the ins and outs of the law, the administrative aspects and all that. Like, how can we get rid, number one, the fastest legal way of this mayor? Because he's getting in the way. And if the city councilors want to go next, then why not? Whoever's not going to do their job and do it right, bye, Felicia. at the same time, really looking into getting these investigations on the, going, get that ball rolling, because we know some of the evidence that was already destroyed, whether it was in all these other, in these fatal shootings or whether in Mary Hahn's death, that's lost, okay? That only makes it that much harder. And it pisses me off that somebody's out there and they're supposed to be in jail. And it's not just these mystery murders who were, I think, the hired hand to kill Mary, but it's these officers who we know who they are, and they're sitting at home collecting a check out of our public pot. And what, sitting there playing violent video games, getting ready for the next time they're sent out irresponsibly by the union? Do you not have standards that you need to maintain? I know that some things are out of your control, but if I'm representing somebody, you know what, I'm gonna expect that even if they're the biggest screw up, that they have to meet a minimum standard in order to be protected, to enjoy the privilege of having this immunity. And that's the problem, is that if we're gonna have immunity for government officials, we need to have a standard that doesn't allow them to get away with it. If they're not gonna be held to a higher standard, they certainly should be held to one that's lower than like civilians. Because I know that if I go and do something stupid, I'm gonna be in jail pretty fast. So I just want to say thank you for getting this off the ground and those of you coming together. But like, what do we do next short of going to another 12-hour up and down from police department to the UNM? Is that what we want? Is that what it's going to take? Because I think I'm preaching to the choir. But you know what? If we're the ones who are going to have to do that, and if we're going to have to sign those petitions, and if we're going to have to be the ones going out there, then why not? Because you know what? We're either gonna die trying or we're gonna die because we're not standing up to this shit. And I'm tired of that. I'm tired of us dying, okay? I don't wanna go to law school and learn how to fight fair and square only so that I could be found mysteriously dead in my house. It's not all right, So please, by all means, give us some legal strategic suggestions. Thank you.
If the panel will permit. One, I wanted to say that we've always presented solutions to the city of Albuquerque. So I want us to really clearly understand that. We're doing it now, we were doing it before, and we need to continue to do it. My comment, to allow for others to speak is several things. One, this isn't the first consent decree. There was the Duran consent decree. And that was a very, very important historical consent decree for the state of New Mexico, particularly to the state prison system and so on. I don't want to go into that, but I do want to say that I agree with what the professor said. We need to work it, we need to work it hard, we need to understand it, and all aspects of that, we need to be engaged in it. Now, I will say on the opposite of that, I don't want to do anything to waste my time. I mean, we've only got a little bit of time, and I'm a farmer during the daytime, so based upon that stuff, I don't have a whole lot of time. But what I'm saying is that, again, that we need to come together as a community. So I want to hang in there with the folk that want to work the consent decree. I don't want to waste my time, but we'll work those pieces. The other one is we need to stay on the street. We need to stay on the street, we need to stay on the street. And non-violently, I would be the first to say that, although in the past we've been accused of things that we were not responsible for. It was the responsibility of Albuquerque Police Department. But we need to stay on the streets. And some may disagree with that because we need to stay public on this. We need to demand, we need to protest. At the end of the day, if we need to occupy, if we need to sit in, if we need to make a citizen's arrest, I don't know what it is. All I know that we need to use every legal means that we have at our disposal to do that. Now, some of you may know or may not know, in the 70s and the 80s, we attempted to make a citizen's arrest on the warden at the state penitentiary. Now, we knew we were going to be arrested, but I will guarantee you something, the issues that were coming down in the state penitentiary because churches and communities and other institutions and organizations came together, it's not the same as it was before. That's not to say it's perfect, but very clearly it's not the same. The other thing is that I have the respect for the commissioner for coming out this evening, but I do have to say is that commission needs to hold some responsibility. And yeah, it's not all of them. Some of them have. On the opposite side of that coin, some of them haven't, and they need to continue to be held responsible. They're the ones that, in some cases, allowed for the continuation of this happen. The families were testifying. People were going in talking about police repression, police brutality, and all these issues, and then it continued and continued and continued. So we need to keep I appreciate the 6 minutes. It's 4 more minutes than we get at the city council. You know, now I do say that I want to respect the commissioner for coming out this evening. The other thing is the chief of police. You know, I mean, let's just be real about this. The mayor is the person that made the decision who the chief of police was. So the mayor needs to continue to be held responsible. The mayor is not controlling or running this city. It's being run by Perry. Now, let's be real about that. Who is Perry? What's his history? Where did he come from? Where was he at before this, and so on? So there's a whole set of things here that we need to stay in tune with. Lastly, I will say the district attorney. Now, we look at the grand jury. I chaired the New Mexico Committee Against Grand Jury Repression, because what ends up happening is that when we go in front of, or subpoenaed to go in front of the grand jury, the prosecutor is the district attorney, and she or he, in this case, is there to protect themselves and the self-interest of others. So based upon that, you can't even have a lawyer when you go into the grand jury system. So when I was subpoenaed to the grand jury for making public comments about the assassination of our members, it wasn't about what the history of our organization was or whatever. The question that was asked by the district attorney is, could you give us the names, addresses, and telephone numbers of every member of your organization? And then, very interestingly, just to say that, and then they proceeded to do that. Were you present here? You know, the attorney couldn't come in the room. The attorney couldn't be in there. You had no defense. You had not. It was you and the district attorney. Now the district attorney has to bear the responsibility, and she hasn't taken nothing to no place in terms of herself. I saw her on TV last night talking about whatever. How can we have respect for people that have no respect for us, for our dignity, for our communities, for our self-presence, or anything else? How are we supposed to give that same respect back to anyone else? So I will honestly plead to you, and lastly to say this, these families have hung hell of a tough. You know what I'm saying? So this comment that was made about I'll shoot him, his peanuts and this kind of thing, I said that to you earlier because when Tommy Bias was killed in the Old Town Plaza in 1968 and 1969, that police officer said to another police officer, if I see that son of a bitch on the street, I'm going to kill him. And several hours later, he was dead. Does that sound familiar with what happened in very similar situations? So I'm saying that I'm not trying to be disrespectful to Stephanie, to anyone else. All I'm saying is you all need to break that code of silence. And I will say to you, those couple of police officers that did it in 1972, when our members were assassinated, were threatened by other police officers to be killed if they continued to testify publicly about what they heard in the locker room and all the other kind of things that were happening. So I just say to you, at the end of the day, sisters and brothers, we got to stay united on this. It ain't going to turn over overnight. It didn't happen overnight, and it ain't going to be turned over overnight. So we need to stay strong. Stay strong on the consent decree. I think that we need to continue to push our demands forward and move forward and stay on the streets and many other places that we need to be.
At the end of a long and lawless day. That's how it is here in Albuquerque, but I'll tell you what, I left my own broken city to arrive in another broken city with a few comrades in Ferguson, Missouri. Originally, I didn't plan to go there, but something compelled us to go about a week later. And I will tell you that these people occupy day and night. And when government fears its people, there is liberty. And when we fear our government, there is tyranny. And there are tyrants in our public buildings right now. Whoever it has to be, we need to be able to recall them. And by recalling, we need to have enough people at the polls if that's how we're going to go. There ain't enough people to recall the mayor. That's the answer. Yeah. And that's the truth at the end of the day. The buck stops there. Carrie Brandenburg, she has the authority to indict a ham sandwich if she wanted to. But you see, Carrie Brandenburg is our first line of defense. And she has proven otherwise, and that's a fact. That debate is now over. That debate is over. The mayor, he could have took better care of us. He could have took better care of his police department, but you see, he didn't. See, because Sandy probably shouldn't have never been a police officer. He should have never had the honor of serving this, if that's how we're going. That's how I feel. I don't consent. I don't consent. And I'll keep saying it. We need to occupy our streets. And at the end of the day, when it says we the people of the United States in order to form a more perfect union, they talking about us. We give them the consent to govern us, period. If we don't like it, we need to say we don't consent. We need to flood our chambers. We need to flood our public buildings until it gets done. We need to work inside our communities. And we need to give our own communities what we need. Mental health, assistance, whatever it is in order to drive these people. And if government has the money, then we just need to take it. We are the boss of them. That's the way it goes. And I get it doesn't sound very realistic because perhaps we're used to like this, living in that square. But I'm a circle being forced into that square. I ain't going. And if I don't get what I want at the end of the day, then I'll resist all the way through because resistance is victory. It's all we got. When all you got is rocks, you throw rocks.
Thank you, Dent.
I agree with Ms. Vargas next to me that we don't stand a realistic chance of recalling the mayor. It's a waste of time. The mayor has been a tremendous disappointment, at least to me, and a coward. This was a time when we needed leadership. It's difficult to be a leader, but he needed to stand out there in the strong wind and be somebody. Even when council...
Do you understand the process of...
I believe I do. I'll talk to you about it.
Do you mind summarizing that for the audience, please? I just want them to understand where the complication is in your mind.
The administration administers laws. Policy is made and laws are made by City Council. The place for our best pressures is most likely at City Council. The mayor wouldn't even sign the new police oversight ordinance that the City Council passed, and they passed it unanimously. When the mayor makes no comment on a bill, unless he vetoes it, it just goes into law. So the mayor couldn't even clear his throat and write his name on the thing. Pretty shocking. Pretty disappointing. Now, City Council has done whatever they've done, and they've created an ordinance. Several of them have mentioned to me it's got warts and flaws, and I think it does. I've sent them a list of at least 6 areas where I think it takes profound change. And the next thing that citizens can do are twofold. Keep going to council and keep finding out what those are and consolidate around a couple of winnable key points. Number 2, be watchdogs on that new oversight commission and report back to the newspaper and to council and do what you can to say this is working when it works, hooray, or this is a failure and this is why. And these are things that an active citizenry can do in a positive way. I would hope that Stephanie would endorse this. I would hope that all would endorse it so that the thing can be fine-tuned, adjusted within the system, as Tom talked about, and as the law professor, Mr. Matheson, spoke to us about. Let's get inside the system, let's mess with the dials, and let's make the adjustments that we can. I'm not ready for a revolution over this. I'm ready to adjust the thing back until we own again what we rightfully do, which is our city, and we're not cowards about it.
Thank you, sir.
Any more comments from the panel? Do we want to wrap it up? Dinah?
I would just like to say in closing that when we think about life after the consent decree, if we can think about life after the consent decree and how we want our communities to look and how we want our economy to grow, our children to learn, how we want life. And if that life does not add up to life after the consent decree, then we should not consent. That's just my opinion. Thank you.
Well, thank you all very much for coming and drive safe.